right? So, for example, many people would think hazardous environments as hazmat related things, but saying the way that they set up and do their operations would be the same regardless of hazmat versus an active shooter type of situation. So we found a challenge getting drilled down into the specific. So I guess my question would be, how drilled down have you gotten in certain topics, and have you faced some circling conversations in, well, we're doing the same thing for that level of safety and risk mitigation at the end of the day? Or do you find that there are very strong, distinct differences where you need very narrowed scenarios?
As I said, we see these scenarios as a frame, as an envelope, where many operations can take place for different use cases. So we don't, in principle, target to develop very specific scenarios for very specific particular uses. So, but definitely when the most challenging scenarios would be these detailed scenarios for declaration, because there we need to prescribe very much all the provisions, and for that we may also need some additional guidance material, for example. And so, for example, from standardization bodies, it would be very good to have this input there. For example, to for example, in the case, for example, of how making a CONOPS, already SORA provides some. An annex indicating how, but there are other aspects there that are still not covered that we may need to cover, but it would be helpful if organizations like yours can provide some inputs.
Could you give us an idea which use cases or applications would fall under this generic standard scenario? Concrete?
Many. I mean, this generic is BV laws. We have not established a range limit, so the operator will need to discuss with the authority its plans for using visual observers, for example, to extend to a certain range in a way that is safe. The only limit is that all the operation volume has to be below 150 meters. I mean, it has to be in over a sparsely populated area, but you can imagine that many operations can take place there. I mean, it can be linear inspection, agriculture. We believe that many operations can take place there. Of course, not those guys who want to operate within cities. So if someone wants to make aerial photography to make an advertisement within a city, it will not be possible with this generic scenario, or if he wants to use a huge drone, for example.
As far as I've understood, you have 4 or 5 main points that characterize the STS, like operational limitations, operational provisions, where at the same time the technical aspects of the UAV are just a sub-issue of operational limitations. Wouldn't it be more logic to give the technical characteristics of the UAS for this STS an own main point, like operational limitations, on the same level, so that you say, okay, this STS is more appropriate for the small, let me say it easily like this, smaller drones, and the other one is more applicable for the bigger ones? Or did you consider it only operational approach like?
No, actually we have operational limitations, and we have also technical, but it's not within the operational limitations. So it has its own entity. At the end, anyway, the important thing is that all aspects are addressed. So, but I can show you. Or maybe I made a mistake in the slide. I don't know. So you mean when I was speaking about... But here we are talking about limitations, whereas what you were talking about is provisions.
There again, you mix operation with technical requirements of the UAS, of the technical systems, which I personally would separate from each other.
I mean, the limitations are the boundaries of the scenario, right? So these are, we call it operational, but actually is as you can see, it covers many aspects. But then we have these provisions which include all the mitigation measures, including operational aspects, but also technical aspects. Okay, I mean, it's under discussion, so of course we can improve this. It's not main issue.
Did you have any manufacturers' comments on the fact that there are different technical requirements for different scenarios? From a business and economical point of view, maybe it could be more interesting to have common requirement, technical requirement on all drones for the specific category, and then just have some specific features added for the more higher risk scenarios.
So you mean a kind of a drone categorization like we have in the open category, let's say?
Why not?
This is something that we have internally also discussed. It could be in the future. We are more or less aligned with the SORA development. So in that case, it's not yet there, but I know that also within the SORA environment, this point has been raised. So in the future, it may make sense to have some like broad categories, and then the operator would say, for example, okay, I would choose for this operation category A drone, for example. Yes, that's a good, interesting point. Maybe
just want to add that this will be also for us. It will be a learning process, as I told you. I think once in some of the presentation today. So when we are developing standard scenario, maybe we can have some manufacturer that will already provide or develop drone that are complying with the sound standard scenario. Then maybe little by little we can then find out that will be a common ground between all the specific operation, maybe with all the BVLOS operation. Maybe then we can in the future build some kind of families of the technical requirements. But I think it's something that little by little we will learn. Now, I don't know if then we will be able to accommodate this with the C marking. At this moment, the C marking is only for the open category. So maybe the additional requirements we will manage in a different way, either to standards or either to our MC, ATSO. I don't know. So we are open to different options, and we will learn in the future what will be the best.
Why would there not be possible to define some of these requirements as of now? For example, take geocaching. It's very important for any kind of operation to make sure that the drone will remain in the operational volume, which has been defined at the beginning of the mission. And for example, why would we not have a technical requirement on this function, which is very important both for ground risk and air risk? We have launched in France a study on this, an R&D study on this function, to have different level of safety geocaching in the next years.
What I can say is that, for example, in subpart A, the general provisions, we have included already general technical provisions that would apply to all UAS. So yes, we can. I mean, if we at the end see that geofencing and or its variants like geocaging are to be applicable to all drones, we may put that as a provision for all scenarios. Why not? But at the moment, I'm not sure we are still there to be certain whether such requirement for geofencing, for example, should be applicable to all drones, to all operations. So still something that we need to see. Yes?
I just want to add, but it's something that we'll consider. We think that what you said is interesting, so we will consider if we can have some minimum basis for the specific operation as well.
Big functions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also for link may be different.
I'm on this as well. Yeah. Just on this point, I would hope that we can be a bit careful and a bit open on how such basic requirements are set. For instance, one of the organizations that I'm representing here is Finesse Plus. It's a French organization for large model aircraft gliders. And they might be interested, for instance, in having a standard scenario on slope soaring, and there's no way that we can do geocaging for model aircraft that fly on slopes. So I'd hope that we don't actually close the options for standard scenarios by precluding specific types of activities already in the general definition of what a standard scenario is.
Yeah, thank you.
And I wanted to go in the same direction. I think the important thing is what EASA and JRS has been doing while developing standard scenario is to stay consistent with the SORA. And the SORA is risk-based, and we have tried to develop criteria what needs to be done when the risk leads to a cell 2, 3, or 4. I mean, imposing geofencing or whatever for all specific category it will need to be discussed. The comments will need to be raised at SORA level. If French DGSE has an issue with the SORA because we are missing some technical requirements, like the geofencing for all UAS, we need to discuss this at SORA level. But at the moment, for the lower sale, we impose almost nothing because we believe that, okay, it's not open, but the risks are very low, so we don't want to over-constrain the design as well. So I will be a little bit careful to have general requirements imposed for all UAS under the specific category. We need to be moderate and assess the associated risks. So for higher risk, anyways, I will be, for cell 4, for instance, I will be, we are requesting compliance to some standards. Huh? So of course we are going to be very constraining for cell 4, 5, or 6 operations, but for cell 1 or 2, it needs to be really discussed whether this is absolutely necessary considering the level of risk.
Mm-hmm. And to complement that, we need to take into account that these scenarios are European-wide. So maybe in France there is a need to implement this geocaging, but not in other places. So this is something that should be taken into account as well.
The risk with different technical requirements for different scenarios is to fragment the market and not offer to the manufacturers a big enough amount of drones to be sold for one given scenario and have them develop different models for different scenarios without the ability for one drone to perform in one or more scenario, or with drones being too costly because they have been developed for a lot of scenarios at the same time, which make them less competitive for the lower risk scenarios, and so on. So I'm worried about the economical side of this position and also for the safety, because we won't begin the discussion on SORA today, but yes, we will have lots of comments from the Civil Drones Council to present probably on the SORA, yes.
Thank you. Any more questions? So we're security and privacy environment protection. At the moment we have just very generic elements there, which are already included in the subpart A, in the general provisions applicable to all scenarios. So those of you who will be attending tomorrow and the day after, you will see in the scenario that we have drafted that we have included already some sections on these aspects that of course we will need to expand as long as we have more inputs. And what criteria need to be met in order for a standard scenario to qualify for declaration or authorization? This is something that we are discussing also. It will be a risk-based criteria, and first proposal that we were discussing was, for example, if we take the SORA methodology, those scenarios, for example, that might fall under SAIL 1 could be considered maybe directly declarative scenarios, whereas those which are already SAIL 2, we may need to see on a case-by-case basis, and if there are more than SAIL 2, probably there will be a need for those scenarios to be under authorization. That could be a criteria, risk-based criteria. But this is still under discussion.
Any other question on the structural standard scenario?
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. So this was the last topic in the agenda. Is there any other question on all the topics that we discussed this morning, or any other topic that someone would like to raise? So, okay, we have a question. Can you go give it?
Sorry, thank you. Just one practical question in relation to timing. So, what is your expected your expected time that you will need to develop a standard scenario? I'm asking this with a very specific objective in mind. We will have 3 years from the entry into force of the regulation as an exemption for model aircraft. If we need a number of standard scenarios, when do we need to start developing them? Is it going to take half a year, year and a half, 2 years? Do you have any timelines for that?
Thank you. So this gives me the opportunity also to sum up the discussion that we had today. So we have seen what is the process that we would like, that we, let's say, sponsor for defining a risk assessment. So we saw the safety, we saw the privacy, we saw the security. So what we will do in the next months is we will ask all organizations that would like to propose standard scenario, they can provide us those scenario. If they are able also to complete a risk assessment, this will help us. But in any way, then we will work together to finalize the risk assessment. So as a timeline, we were seeing this morning that the basic regulation will be enter into force in September this year. Then the European Commission will complete the discussion of the regulation on open and specific operation. So I'm referring to the implementing rule delegated act by the end of the year. It should be, I think, end of October is planned to have the one of the last meeting. So sometime before the end of the year, we should have the regulation adopted by the European Commission. So this will allow us then to publish the decision, including all the MCA and guidance material that we already published to the regulation as informative material on our website. And in addition, we will also include the description of the SORA and the first standard scenario that we are going to discuss tomorrow. The next activity that we will do next year is to, first of all, collect all possible standard scenario that are proposed by, I said, member states or associations. We will prioritize according to what I showed you before, and we will develop a second set of standard scenario. So sometime next year. Now I cannot now commit for a date because this is something depends also on the workload, on also the other activity that we are now completing, and also heavily will depend on how we'll go on the discussion on the regulation that or the open specific that today is still going on at the European Commission. So I invite everybody to send us a proposal. We will evaluate. So please send us a proposal that can be applicable at European level. We will try to publish to propose a list of standard scenario. This is one of the first thing next year, and we will involve you as the stakeholders in the way I showed you before, in order to help us prioritizing the work. And it's something that we will not be static. So every time we will receive some new inputs from anyone, we will reevaluate, we will submit for prioritization. Maybe something new will become on top. So depend on what this will be, or maybe less. So it depends on what is the need by all stakeholders. For sure, we are here to support you, to support the member state and to support the US operator. Okay, and in order to make sure that we can start operation of drones in the open and specific as quick as possible. I will send you by tonight the presentations, a copy of the implementing rule or the delegated act as was provided by the European Commission to all the stakeholders last week. So this is the latest draft. However, as I told you, there will be some changes driven by the inter-service consultation that will come up in the next weeks. And I will also send you the presentation that we provide to the stakeholders, defining what are the changes compared to the last document that we published. And also, this morning we did not answer to all the slide questions on safety. We will also provide an answer to all of them. I will not be able to provide an answer by tonight, but in the next days I will do. Tomorrow we will continue the discussion, and so I'm sorry if we restricted the audience, but since tomorrow we want to have a working environment, so we were feeling that if we are too large group, was more difficult to manage the discussion. So this moment we are discussing a standard scenario on a say BVLOS operation. So they are operation with drones up to 25 kilograms, where we rely on the use of visual observers. So it's a sort of BVLOS. So we try to only limit the audience to those operator or industry that are could be interested to this kind of operation, and to all the NAA that came to today. But still, I will send those scenarios to all of you, so you can see it, and we will give the opportunity to comment those scenarios to all of you. I think we will have 2-3 weeks. Now we'll decide according to what will be our schedule. But so you will have the opportunity to provide our comments, and we will review all of them. So this then lead to the end of the workshop. And first of all, I want to thank all the people that was very helpful to support, from Diego, our organize, and our assistants, and also the speaker. Thank you to Joanna, to Dr. Schmidl, and Lorenzo. He left from the main stage. You want, I think, listing here, and also to Daniel. So thank you, everybody, and we are always here available to answer to all your questions. So you can provide us, and we will try to do our best to answer as quick as we can.